In the shadows of Montana's sprawling ranchlands, Graeme Westfield built an empire of wealth and solitude. Known for his methodical nature and haunted by his wife's tragic death, he chose isolation over company, precision over emotion. But fate had other plans. One stormy night, while inspecting an abandoned barn on his vast property, he discovers something that shatters his carefully ordered world. A pregnant young woman, chained and barely alive, hiding secrets as dark as the bruises marking her skin. What begins as an act of rescue evolves into something neither of them expected. She's running from a sinister trafficking ring. He's running from his past. Together they might just find what they never knew they were looking for. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The old storm lantern cast uncertain shadows across the barn's weathered boards as Graeme Westfield knelt beside the huddled figure. His hands, calloused from years of ranch work, yet steady from military discipline, moved with deliberate care. As he opened his emergency medical kit, the woman flinched at every movement, her eyes wild with fear, one arm protectively curved around her swollen belly. "I'm not gonna hurt you," he said, his voice low and measured, the same tone he'd used years ago to calm spooked horses. "I'm going to remove these chains first." He held up the bolt cutters from his truck, moving slowly so she could see his intentions clearly. Thunder rolled across the Montana sky, and she pressed herself further into the corner. Graeme noticed how her bare feet had angry red marks around the ankles, how her dress, once probably a cheerful yellow, was now stained and torn. His jaw tightened, but he kept his expression neutral. 20 years of military service had taught him that sometimes the quietest approach was the most effective. Miguel, his ranch foreman and closest friend, appeared at the barn door, rainwater dripping from his hat brim. "Senor Graeme, I've got the truck warmed up and—" He stopped short, taking in the scene. Without another word, he pulled out his phone and stepped back outside. Graeme knew Miguel would make the right calls. Doc Helena first, then Sheriff Patterson, but only after they had the situation secured. They'd worked together long enough to read each other's minds. "My name is Graeme Westfield," he continued, speaking to the woman as he carefully positioned the bolt cutters. "This is my ranch. You're safe here." The chains fell away with a dull clank, and he immediately backed up, giving her space. She remained frozen, her breathing rapid and shallow. Graeme recognized the signs of severe trauma. He'd seen enough of it during his tours. Reaching into the medical kit, he pulled out a sealed blanket and placed it within her reach before withdrawing again. "There's a doctor coming," he explained, settling himself on an old crate just far enough away to not seem threatening. "She's good people, been looking after the ranch hands and their families for years." He kept his voice steady, weaving in small details about the ranch, about Doc Helena's famous homemade tamales, about anything that might help anchor this frightened soul to something normal and safe. The woman's eyes darted between Graeme and the barn door, calculating. Her hand trembled as she reached for the blanket, but there was something in her movement, a certain deliberateness, that told Graeme she wasn't as helpless as she appeared. Survivors rarely were. Miguel's boots scuffed the doorway again. "Doc's 10 minutes out. Sheriff's been notified, but staying clear for now." He didn't enter, just delivered the information and disappeared again, understanding instinctively that too many people would overwhelm their unexpected guest. Graeme noticed how the woman's attention sharpened at the mention of the sheriff, fear flickering across her face. "Nobody's going to make any decisions without your input," he assured her. "Right now, we're just focusing on making sure you and the baby are okay." For the first time, something other than fear showed in her expression. Surprise, perhaps even a ghost of relief. Graeme had seen that look before too, in war zones and disaster areas. It was the look of someone who'd forgotten that their own choices mattered. The storm continued its assault on the barn's tin roof, but inside, a fragile calm had begun to settle. The woman had wrapped herself in the blanket, her movements careful, but less panicked. Graeme maintained his position, neither advancing nor retreating, just being present. Sometimes he knew that was the most important thing you could offer another human being, the gift of patient, non-demanding presence. Doc Helena's truck rumbled up the muddy drive, and Graeme saw their guest tense again. "She'll knock 3 times, he said softly. "That's her way, always has been. Says it's more polite than barging in, even in an emergency." He kept his tone conversational, watching as the woman processed this small, normal detail about the doctor she was about to meet. The 3 knocks came just as he'd described, and something minute relaxed in the woman's shoulders. Graeme allowed himself a small breath of relief. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The first step in what he suspected would be a long journey for all of them. In the quiet of his study, Graeme twisted the gold band he still wore, moonlight catching its worn surface. Sarah's ring, her matching one, lay in its velvet box on his desk, untouched for 5 years. Doc Helena had suggested he move it to storage last year, part of her gentle campaign to help him step forward. But some things weren't meant to be rushed. The woman from the barn, now sleeping under Doc Helena's supervision in the East Wing guest room, had stirred something he'd thought long buried. Not attraction, nothing so simple. Rather, it was the echo of duty, purpose, the weight of responsibility he'd carried as both a soldier and a husband. "You always did have a weakness for lost causes," Sarah would have said, that knowing smile playing at her lips. She'd been the one to help him transition from military to civilian life, teaching him that precision and passion weren't mutually exclusive. Thunder still rattled the windows, and Graeme's mind drifted back to another stormy night, 12 years ago. He'd just bought the ranch, more land than any sane person would want, according to the local coffee shop gossip. Sarah had stood with him on the front porch, her artist's eyes seeing past the peeling paint and sagging boards to something greater. "It's not just a ranch," she'd said, squeezing his hand. "It's a fresh start, a place where broken things can heal." She'd been right, of course. Under their care, the ranch had transformed. Sarah's gardens brought colour to the grounds, while Graeme's military precision turned the operation into a model of efficiency. They'd created something remarkable together, a sanctuary that drew people in. Miguel and his family had come first, then others, ranch hands, seasonal workers, all finding their place in the growing community. Graeme's fingers found the small scar on his wedding band, a nick from the day everything changed. He'd been in town discussing cattle futures with the bank when the call came. Sarah, always adventurous, had taken one of the new horses out alone. A sudden storm, a spooked animal, a tragic fall. By the time they found her, it was too late. The doctors said she hadn't suffered, but that knowledge offered little comfort in the years that followed. Graeme had retreated into himself, running the ranch with cold efficiency, letting the gardens wither. Miguel had tried to maintain them at first, but eventually understood that some wounds needed time to scab over. "You're brooding again, viejo." Miguel's voice came from the doorway, accompanied by the smell of strong coffee. He set a mug on Graeme's desk, then settled into the worn leather chair by the fireplace. It had been Sarah's favourite spot for reading. "Just thinking," Graeme replied, picking up the coffee. Miguel had been making these late-night appearances since Sarah's death, perhaps understanding that some ghosts were easier to face with company. "The girl," Miguel said, "not a question. She reminds you of the ones we couldn't save, back then." Graeme nodded slowly. Their unit had encountered trafficking victims before, in places where war and poverty made people desperate. But this was different. This was his land, his country. The thought that such darkness could reach even here. "Doc says she's about 7 months along," Miguel continued. "Healthy, considering, but scared. The kind of scared that doesn't go. Away with a warm bed and hot meal. She'll need protection," Graeme said, his tactical mind already mapping out security improvements. The ranch's isolation, once a burden of loneliness, now seemed like an advantage. "She'll need more than that. Miguel replied softly. She'll need what Sarah always said this place could be, a sanctuary. Graeme's hand tightened around Sarah's ring box. The velvet was worn smooth from years of similar moments sitting here, seeking answers from memories. But tonight felt different. Tonight the weight of the past seemed to be pulling him not backward, but forward. Sarah would have known exactly what to do, he said, a rare admission of uncertainty. Miguel smiled, the expression crinkling the corners of his eyes. Sarah would have already adopted her, painted her room, and started planning the baby shower. He paused, letting the truth of those words settle. Maybe that's not such a bad blueprint to follow. Graeme looked out at the storm-dark ranchlands, remembering Sarah's vision of what this place could be. A sanctuary, a place of healing. Perhaps it was time to dust off that dream, to give it new life. He carefully opened the ring box, looking at Sarah's band one last time before closing it with quiet finality. Tomorrow he'd move it to the safe where it belonged, not forgotten, but no longer a weight around his neck. There was work to be done, and somewhere in the house a frightened young woman who needed more than just his protection. She needed a home. And perhaps, in helping her find one, he might finally find his way back to the man Sarah had always believed him to be. 3 days passed before the first note appeared. Graeme found it on the breakfast tray Maria, Miguel's wife, had left outside the guest room door. The handwriting was precise, each letter carefully formed, as if the writer was remembering how to shape them. "Thank you for the clothes." 4 words that spoke volumes. Graeme studied them over his morning coffee, noting the steady pressure of the pen strokes, the deliberate spacing. Not the writing of someone uneducated, but rather someone who had been denied the simple act of communication for too long. Doc Helena settled into the chair across from his desk, her medical bag still in hand from her morning checkup. "She wrote that herself," she confirmed, anticipating his unspoken question. "And she told me her name, Lena." "Lena," Graeme repeated softly, tasting the name like a rare wine. It felt right, somehow, strong, despite its softness. "She's starting to trust, but slowly," Helena continued, her dark eyes serious. "The baby's doing well, but she's carrying more than just a child, Graeme. The kind of trauma she's been through." She trailed off, choosing her next words carefully. "It's like your war veterans. The enemy might be gone, but the battlefield remains." Graeme nodded, understanding all too well. He'd seen that 1,000-yard stare before, in mirrors and in the eyes of his fellow soldiers. "Has she said anything about—" "Not directly," Helena interrupted. "But I've treated trafficking victims before, at the reservation clinic. The patterns are similar. The way she checks sight lines to exits, how she hoards small items that could be used as weapons." She gave Graeme a meaningful look. "The way she watches you especially. Me. You're a man in a position of power. That's complicated for her right now." Helena leaned forward. "But you're also the one who cut her chains, who hasn't demanded anything in return. She's trying to reconcile these things." A soft knock interrupted them. Maria entered with a fresh pot of coffee and another piece of paper. This note was longer. "The garden outside my window. Was it someone's special place?" Graeme's throat tightened. Sarah's garden. Of course, Lena would sense its significance, even in its neglected state. He picked up a pen, then hesitated. How do you compress love, loss, and redemption into a simple response? Helena touched his arm gently. "The truth, Graeme. She'll know if you offer anything less." He wrote carefully. "My wife, Sarah's. She believed gardens were places where broken things could heal." Maria took the note, murmuring something in Spanish that sounded like a prayer. They waited, the morning sun climbing higher over the ranchlands. When Maria returned, the response made Graeme's hands shake slightly. "Could I help bring it back?" Helena's smile was warm and knowing. "Sometimes," she said softly, "healing comes through growing things." That afternoon, Graeme watched from his office window as Maria led Lena into the overgrown garden. The young woman moved cautiously, one hand resting on her swollen belly, but her face showed the first real animation he'd seen. She touched the withered rose bushes with gentle fingers, examined the choked fountain with professional interest. Another note arrived with his evening coffee. The roses can be saved. The fountain needs new pumps. I used to design gardens before. Such a heavy word. Graeme read between the lines, seeing the person she must have been, educated, creative, free. His jaw clenched at the thought of all that had been stolen from her. But here she was, finding her voice again through Sarah's beloved garden. He wrote back, "Whatever you need, the garden is yours now." The next morning, he found a detailed list of gardening supplies, written in that same precise hand. But it was the postscript that made his weathered heart stir. "My full name is Lena Kovac. I think it's time you knew that." Graeme carefully folded the paper, this precious token of trust, and placed it in his desk drawer. Outside his window, he could see Lena in the garden again, Maria hovering protectively nearby as the young woman sketched in a notebook, planning resurrection. Sometimes healing came through growing things, and sometimes, Graeme realized, it came through allowing others to grow them. Sarah would have understood that. Sarah would have been proud. Graeme spread the ranch deed across his desk, its aged parchment crackling beneath his fingers. The property lines outlined in faded ink encompassed nearly 10,000 acres, natural boundaries formed by river and ridge that had once seemed excessive, but now felt like necessary fortification. Miguel stood at his shoulder, pointing to the western perimeter. "We've upgraded the security cameras here and here," he said, marking the spots with a pencil. "Motion sensors every 50 yards. Torres and his boys are running extra patrols, and I've got Rodriguez installing the new gate system tomorrow." In the distance, they could hear Maria's voice drifting up from the garden, teaching Lena the Spanish names for different herbs. The sound made Graeme's expression soften slightly. After a week at the ranch, Lena's presence was slowly weaving itself into the daily rhythm of ranch life. "Doc Helena's here for the checkup," Miguel mentioned, his tone carefully neutral. They both knew these weekly visits were about more than just prenatal care. Graeme nodded, gathering the deed and returning it to the safe. The document represented more than just property now. It was a promise of protection, a boundary line between Lena and whatever darkness pursued her. In the newly renovated East Wing, Helena's expert hands moved gently over Lena's swollen belly, while Maria hovered nearby, ready to translate if needed. But Lena's English was improving daily, another sign of her gradual return to herself. "The baby's strong," Helena announced, smiling as she listened through her stethoscope. "Good heartbeat, good position. You're doing everything right, Lena." Lena's hands trembled slightly as they rested on her stomach. "And it's really a girl?" "Definitely. A girl," Helena confirmed, her dark eyes gentle. "Would you like to hear her heartbeat?" The sound filled the room, strong, rapid, defiant. Lena's eyes welled with tears, but her voice was steady. They never let me hear it before. They said it wasn't mine to—" Maria's hand found Lena's shoulder, squeezing gently. "Es tu bebé," she said firmly. "Your baby, nobody else's." Helena packed her equipment with deliberate movements, giving Lena time to compose herself. "I'm leaving you some more prenatal vitamins, and I want you to keep working in that garden. The exercise is good for both of you." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "I'm also leaving some names, women who've been through similar situations. When you're ready to talk." Lena nodded, one hand still pressed where she'd heard her daughter's heartbeat. "Thank you for everything." After Helena left, Maria helped Lena back to the garden. Graeme watched from his office as they settled into what had become their routine. Maria, working on the vegetable beds, while Lena tackled Sarah's beloved roses, each woman giving the other comfortable space. The roses were responding to Lena's care, new growth sprouting from old wood. Graeme remembered Sarah saying that roses were stubborn survivors, blooming even after the harshest winters, much like the young woman tending them now. Miguel appeared with the evening security report and a cup of coffee. Rodriguez finished. "The panic buttons," he said quietly. "Installed them just like she asked, under the workbench by the fountain near the garden gate. Places that looked natural to reach for." Graeme nodded, approval and grief warring in his chest. It was good that Lena felt secure enough to make such requests, terrible that she needed to. "And the safe room?" Finished. "Hidden door looks like a bookshelf. Maria's stocked it with supplies, including—" Miguel hesitated. "Including things for the baby, just in case." Just in case. The words hung heavy in the air. They were building a fortress, piece by piece, but Graeme knew better than most that every fortress could be breached. What mattered was having a plan when it happened. The setting sun painted the garden in gold, catching the silver wind chimes Lena had hung that morning. Their gentle music drifted up to the office, mixing with the sound of Maria's laughter at something Lena had said. For now, at least, they had this, a moment of peace, hard-won and precious. Graeme touched the deed in his safe, feeling the weight of his responsibility. This land had always been a sanctuary, first for him and Sarah, then for the people who'd become family. Now it would be a sanctuary for Lena and her unborn daughter, no matter what storm was brewing on the horizon. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, mixed innocuously with feed invoices and cattle reports. Plain white envelope, no return address, typed with mechanical precision. Graeme's hands stilled as he read it, decades of military training keeping his expression neutral, even as ice formed in his gut. "We know she's there. The child is valuable merchandise. This can end two ways." Miguel, sorting through payroll documents nearby, noticed the change in his boss's posture. 20 years of friendship had taught him Graeme's tells. "Senor?" Graeme passed him the letter wordlessly. Miguel read it, his weathered face darkening. "They're watching the ranch." "No." Graeme's voice was quiet, certain. "If they were watching, they'd know about the security upgrades. This is a fishing expedition." He stood, moving to the window that overlooked the garden. Lena was there with Maria, both women wearing wide-brimmed hats as they worked on the roses. The morning sun caught the small silver cross at Maria's neck, a gift from her husband on their 20th anniversary. "Still," Miguel said, "we should increase patrols. Maybe call in some favors from—" "No outside help yet," Graeme interrupted. "The more people who know about Lena, the more vectors of attack we create." His military vocabulary slipped out, a sign of how deeply the threat had stirred old instincts. "For now, we tighten what we have. I want you to move your family into the East Wing." Miguel started to protest, but Graeme held up a hand. "It's not just about protection. Lena trusts Maria more than anyone, except maybe Doc Helena. Having you all closer." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "It's about building something stronger than just security cameras and guard posts." Understanding softened Miguel's expression. "Community," he said, "like what you and Senora Sara created." "Here before," Graeme nodded, memories of happier times flickering through his mind. The ranch had once been full of life. Barbecues on Sundays, children playing in the gardens, Sarah's art students setting up easels wherever the light was best. After her death, he'd let all that slip away, retreating into isolation like a wounded animal. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Maria entered, her face troubled. "Lena's having one of her bad days," she said softly. "She saw the mail truck and—" She gestured helplessly. Graeme's jaw tightened. Of course, Lena would be hyper-aware of anything that might carry news of her. Pursuers, the trauma response of a hunted animal. "Is she in the safe room?" Maria shook her head. "The roses. She says the thorns make her feel protected." Something about that detail made Graeme's chest ache. He picked up the threatening letter, decision crystallizing. "Miguel, get me Sheriff Patterson on the phone. Maria, tell Cook we'll need rooms prepared for your family by tonight," and he hesitated, then pulled Sarah's old Rolodex from his desk drawer. "See if any of Sarah's art students still live locally, the ones who used to help with estate security during shows." Miguel's eyebrows rose. You're thinking of bringing the community back? I'm thinking it's harder to attack a living ranch than a mausoleum, Graeme replied, already dialing the sheriff's number. And I'm done letting fear, hers or mine, dictate how we live. Outside, wind chimes tinkled in the breeze, their silver music carrying across the garden where Lena worked among the roses. Her movements were quick, almost furtive, but she hadn't hidden. Graeme watched as she carefully pruned dead wood away from new growth, her actions reflecting a truth she might not even recognize yet. Sometimes protection meant clearing away the past to make room for whatever came next. The sheriff's gruff voice came on the line, and Graeme straightened. "Jim, we need to talk about expanding that investigation." "Yes, the trafficking case." He glanced at the letter again, at its clinical threat against an unborn child. "And Jim, bring whatever federal contacts you've been holding back. It's time to go. On offense." As he spoke, Graeme saw Maria return to the garden, watched her gentle coaxing draw Lena away from her thorny sanctuary and toward the house. The young woman's steps were reluctant but steady, one hand resting on her swollen belly while the other clasped Maria's offered support. The sight cemented his resolve. He'd built his wealth through calculation, his reputation through precision, but Sarah had taught him that true strength often came from softer things: community, trust, the slow healing of shared meals and gentle words. His enemies were counting on finding an isolated target, a weak point to exploit. Instead, they would find something far more formidable: a family circling its wagons, a community remembering its bonds, and a man remembering that the best defenses were built not of walls, but of people who stood together. Let them come, Graeme thought, watching Lena disappear into the house's safety. They would learn what Sarah had always known, that love, when properly motivated, could be the deadliest force of all. The family Bible lay open on Graeme's desk, its leather binding worn smooth by generations of hands. Inside, births, marriages, and deaths were recorded in varying shades of ink, telling the story of the Westfield line. The last entry, written in his own tight script, marked Sarah's passing. Now he contemplated the blank space below it, weighing the decision he was about to make. Sheriff Patterson's words from their morning meeting still echoed in his mind. "Without legal standing, you can't make medical decisions for her or the baby. If they find her, you'd have no rights to protect either of them." Doc Helena sat across from him now, her expression grave. "Graeme, are you sure about this? Marriage is more than just legal protection." "I know." He ran a finger along the Bible's gilt edges, remembering how Sarah had insisted on keeping the family traditions alive. "But it's the surest way to shield them both. And," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "it feels right. Not as a replacement for what I had with Sarah, but as something new, something honorable." Helena's face softened. "Have you asked her yet?" "No." Graeme closed the Bible gently. "I wanted your opinion first. You understand her trauma better than anyone." "She trusts you," Helena said slowly. "More than she probably trusts any man right now. But marriage, it could feel like trading one form of captivity for another." Graeme nodded, having considered this. "That's why I want to make it clear. She'd have her own accounts, complete. Independence. The marriage would give her legal protection and nothing else, unless—" He trailed off, unwilling to voice the fragile hope that had been growing in him. "Unless she wants more," Helena finished softly. "Oh, Graeme, you're falling in love with her, aren't you?" "I'm falling in love with who she's fighting to become," he corrected. "The woman who faces her fears in that garden every day. The mother who's determined to give her child a future." He stood, moving to the window where he could see Lena working among the roses. "Sarah always said love wasn't about possession. It was about providing the strength someone needed to become their truest self." Helena was quiet for a long moment. "Then ask her," she finally said. "But make sure she understands she has the right to say no." That evening, as the sun painted the mountains gold, Graeme found Lena in Sarah's old studio. She'd taken to spending time there, arranging dried flowers from the garden in delicate compositions. Her artistic eye was returning, another piece of herself reclaimed from the darkness. "The roses are blooming," she said without turning, her hands steady as she wove stems together. "Yellow ones like sunshine?" "Sarah's favorites," Graeme replied, settling into a chair nearby. She said they reminded her that joy could grow even in thorny places. Lena's hands stilled. "You still miss her very much." "I do," he acknowledged. "But she taught me that love doesn't end with loss. It just changes form." He took a deep breath. "Lena, I need to ask you something. Something that might seem strange, maybe even frightening." She turned then, one hand instinctively moving to protect her rounded belly, but her eyes were steady, watching him with that quiet strength that continued to amaze him. "The people looking for you. They have resources, connections. Right now, legally, I can only offer you limited protection." He leaned forward, keeping his posture open, non-threatening. "Marriage would change that, give you and the baby legal safety nets that nothing else can match." Lena's breath caught, but she didn't retreat. "You would marry me, even knowing what I am, what I've been. I would marry you knowing who you are," Graeme corrected gently. "A survivor, an artist, a mother-to-be. Everything else is just shadows, and shadows can't stand against the light." Tears filled her eyes, but her voice was steady. "Would it be real?" "It would be whatever you want it to be," he answered honestly. "A legal arrangement only, or—" He gestured to the studio around them, to the life slowly rebuilding itself. "Or something we build together day by day, choice by choice. No pressure, no expectations, just possibility." Lena looked down at her hands, still holding the dried flowers. "I need time to think, of course." Graeme stood slowly. "Take all the time you need. The choice is yours, Lena, completely yours." As he reached the door, her voice stopped him. "Graeme, thank you for making it a choice." He turned back, seeing her haloed by the setting sun, her face more peaceful than he'd ever seen it. In that moment, he realized that whether she said yes or no, he'd already received his answer about love after loss. Sarah had been right. It did change form, becoming something new and unexpected, but no less sacred for its transformation. The simple gold band caught the first light of dawn, its surface unmarked by engraving or embellishment. Graeme held it carefully as Judge Martinez, Helena's husband, read the civil ceremony words in a low, dignified voice. They stood in Sarah's garden, where the yellow roses were opening to the morning sun, their fragrance mixing with the mountain air. Lena wore a cream-colored dress Maria had altered, her dark hair crowned with small white flowers from the greenhouse. Her hand was steady as Graeme slipped the ring onto her finger, though he could feel her pulse racing where their skin met. 3 days of careful thought had led to her acceptance, and one quiet request. "At dawn, please. When the light changes, everything." Miguel and Maria stood as witnesses, their own rings catching the sunrise. Doc Helena completed their small circle, her medical bag discreetly nearby, a precaution for Lena's advanced pregnancy that they hoped wouldn't be needed. No other ranch hands were present. Security demanded discretion by the power vested in me by the state of Montana, Judge Martinez concluded, his voice gentle but firm. "I now pronounce you husband and wife." There was no kiss. Instead, Graeme and Lena clasped hands, a gesture of partnership that felt more honest than any traditional display. The judge signed their marriage certificate with flourish, making it official. Lena Kovacs was now Lena Westfield, protected by law and name. "The papers will be filed within the hour," the judge assured them, understanding the urgency behind this dawn ceremony. "Copies will be sent to all relevant authorities." Maria stepped forward with coffee and the breakfast she'd insisted on preparing. Fresh. Bread, fruit and eggs still warm from the kitchen. They settled at the small garden table, this makeshift family, as the sun continued its climb over the mountains. The roses, Lena said softly, looking at the blooms she'd nursed back to health. They're witnesses too. Graeme caught the poetry in her words, so like Sarah's way of seeing beauty in unexpected places. They're celebrating, he replied, surprising himself with the sentiment. A ghost of a smile touched Lena's lips. New beginnings, he confirmed, watching as she absently twisted the gold band on her finger. It was sized perfectly. Maria had helped with that detail, discreetly, measuring Lena's finger while teaching her to knead bread dough. Doc Helena raised her coffee cup. To protection, she said carefully, choosing a word that acknowledged the practical nature of their union while leaving room for whatever might grow from it. To family, Miguel added, his arm around Maria's shoulders. Blood or chosen? It's all the same in the end. Lena's free hand rested on her belly, where her daughter grew stronger each day. Two choices, she whispered, and Graeme heard everything she wasn't saying, about the choices taken from her and the ones she was reclaiming. One careful step at a time, the morning progressed with quiet efficiency. Judge Martinez and his wife departed with the signed certificates. Miguel began his security rounds, and Maria went to prepare the house for the day. Graeme and Lena found themselves alone in the garden, the gold band between them now a tangible reminder of their shared purpose. There are papers in my office, Graeme said gently. When you're ready, bank accounts, property rights, everything in your name. Lena nodded, her eyes on the distant mountains. I never thought I'd have a name again. They took it, you see, made me answer to other things. Graeme's hand tightened on his coffee cup, but he kept his voice steady. Your name is yours now, whatever you choose to do with it. Lena Westfield, she tested the words carefully, like tasting unfamiliar food. It feels strong. Like you, Graeme said simply. She turned to him then, her eyes clear and direct. I don't know if I can ever be a real wife. You don't have to be anything except yourself, he assured her. We'll figure out the rest day by day. The morning. Sun had fully cleared the mountains now, painting the garden in clear, honest light. In the distance, they could hear the ranch coming to life, horses nickering, screen doors slamming, Maria's radio playing soft Spanish hymns from the kitchen window. Lena touched one of the yellow roses, its petals still beaded with dew. Sarah would approve, I think, of using marriage as a shield, not a cage. Yes, Graeme said softly, remembering his first wife's fierce belief in love as a force for freedom. Yes, she would. The security footage played on Graeme's laptop in stark black and white, timestamp reading 02:47. 3 figures moved with practiced efficiency along the ranch's western fence line, their movements suggesting military or law enforcement training. They tested the new sensor grid methodically, documenting blind spots. Not amateurs, then, not by a long shot. They're professionals, Miguel confirmed, his voice tight. Ex-military, maybe private security. See how they maintain spacing? How? They check angles. Graeme nodded, his expression granite hard. They're scouting, not attacking, testing our defenses. He paused the footage on a clear shot of their equipment. High-end gear, too. Someone's investing serious resources. The ranch's security room, converted from an old tack storage space, hummed with electronics. Multiple screens showed different angles of the property, while a sophisticated communications array kept them connected to both local law enforcement and private security contractors. Money that had once seemed excessive now felt barely adequate. Sheriff Patterson's team picked up their trail, heading east, Miguel reported, pulling up another screen. But they wanted to be followed, Graeme finished, trying to gauge our response time, our connections. His military training kicked in, analyzing patterns, anticipating moves. They'll be back. Different angle next time. A soft knock interrupted them. Maria entered, her face worried. Lena's asking for you. She sensed something was wrong. Graeme checked his watch. Nearly noon. Lena would be in the garden, working with the roses that had become her sanctuary. He found her there, outwardly calm but with tension visible in the set of her shoulders. They're coming, aren't they? she asked without turning, her hands steady as she pruned dead wood from a climbing rose. They tried, Graeme corrected gently. The security worked. They didn't get within half a mile of the house. Lena's hands stilled on the rose stems. I know their methods, their patience. She turned to face him, one hand resting protectively on her 8-month belly. They'll keep coming until they find a way in. Then we'll keep them out, Graeme said simply. But he saw something in her expression that made him pause. You recognize their tactics. It wasn't a question, but Lena nodded. The man who ran the operation, he used ex-military, said they had the right mindset, understood discipline. Her voice was clinical, distant, as if speaking about someone else's nightmare. They're very good at what they do. So am I, Graeme reminded her. Quietly. 2 decades of Special Forces experience hadn't faded with retirement. And I'm not alone. As if to emphasize his point, the sound of horses approached. Torres and his security team were returning from their patrol, their practiced movements speaking of their own military backgrounds. Graeme had hired selectively, over the years, choosing men and women whose skills matched his exacting standards. Lena watched them with complex emotions playing across her face. All these people risking themselves for me. For us, Graeme corrected, for what's right. He gestured to the garden around them, to the roses that had bloomed under her care. This is your home now. Legally, morally, absolutely. We protect our own here. A flicker of movement caught his attention. Miguel at the garden gate, his expression urgent but controlled. Graeme squeezed Lena's hand gently. I need to review some security footage. Will you be all right here? Maria's in the kitchen, she said, understanding his real question about supervision. I'll help her with lunch preparation. Back in the security room, Miguel pulled up new footage. They left something, he said grimly. Hidden camera here. The screen showed a tiny device concealed in a tree just beyond their property line. State-of-the-art stuff. Solar-powered satellite uplink. Graeme studied the footage carefully. They're watching the ranch's routine, learning patterns. His jaw tightened. Call Torres. I want that camera functional, but feeding them what we choose. Time to play their game. Already done, Miguel confirmed. Doc Helena's husband. You remember he did counter-surveillance work before becoming a judge. He's helping us set up a false pattern, make them think they're seeing our real movements. Graeme allowed himself a grim smile. The enemy was professional, well-equipped and determined, but they'd made one crucial mistake. They assumed they were hunting an isolated target, not a community that had faced down its own shadows and emerged stronger. The afternoon sun slanted through the security room's high windows as they worked, planning countermeasures, adjusting patrol schedules. Through it all, Graeme could hear the distant sound of Maria and Lena in the kitchen, their voices raised in gentle laughter as they prepared the evening meal. Normal sounds, domestic sounds, precious in their ordinariness. He thought of the ring on Lena's finger, of the vows spoken at dawn. Protection had been the practical reason for their marriage, but now, watching her slowly reclaim her life, despite the threats gathering around them, Graeme realized protection was becoming something far more personal than legal documents could express. Let them come, he thought, watching Torres's team implement their counter-surveillance measures. They thought they were hunting a pregnant woman, an easy target. Instead, they'd find themselves facing a family defending its own, and there was nothing more dangerous than that. The leather-bound journal lay between them on Graeme's desk, its pages filled with Lena's precise handwriting. She'd worked on it for days, finding it easier to write her story than speak it. Now, in the quiet of evening, she'd finally placed it in his hands. Read it, she said softly. You need to know everything, to understand what we're really facing. Graeme studied her face in the lamplight, noting the strength beneath her obvious fear. Are you sure? Lena nodded, one hand absently touching her wedding ring. I trust you with my life, my child's life. You should trust me with the truth. He opened the journal carefully, respecting the weight of what it represented. Lena's handwriting flowed across the pages, telling a story that began in Prague 3 years ago, I was a landscape architect, specialized in historical garden restoration. They approached me about a project in America, revitalizing the grounds of an old estate in Montana. Everything seemed legitimate. The company, the paperwork, the references. I was so proud to be chosen. Graeme's hands tightened on the journal. As he read about her arrival in America, how quickly things had gone wrong. The estate was real, but it was a front for something far more sinister. A trafficking operation that specialized in acquiring women with specific skills or backgrounds, breaking them down, then selling them to wealthy clients who wanted cultured companions. They had it down to a science. Isolation, manipulation, carefully applied trauma. They filmed everything, building databases of our reactions, our breaking points. It wasn't just about breaking us, it was about rebuilding us into whatever their clients wanted. The details were clinical, precise, reflecting Lena's effort to distance herself from the horror she described. But between the lines, Graeme could read the deeper wounds, the psychological scars that might never fully heal. When they discovered I was pregnant, everything changed. The baby wasn't part of their plan, but someone higher up saw an opportunity. There's a market, they said, for infants born to women with certain genetic backgrounds, certain abilities. They talked about my child like it was a product being upgraded. The journal documented names, locations, patterns of operation. Lena's architectural training showed in her detailed descriptions of the facilities, the security systems, the routines. Even in captivity, she'd maintained her observer's eye, recording everything that might someday help bring her captors to justice. I wasn't the only one. There were others, a concert pianist from Russia, a biochemist from Sweden, a prima ballerina from Argentina, all chosen for their skills, all being refined for specific buyers. Some broke quickly, others fought. I watched, I learned, and I planned. Graeme paused in his reading, looking up to find Lena standing by the window, her silhouette strong against the gathering darkness. You mapped their patrol patterns, he said quietly. Used their own routines against them. She nodded without turning. 6 months of watching, counting seconds between guard changes, testing reactions. The pregnancy actually helped. They started getting careless, thinking I was too far along to try anything. The escape attempt was detailed with architect's precision. Paths mapped, timings noted, alternatives planned. But what struck Graeme most was her description of the moment she'd found the courage to run. I felt her kick, my daughter, so strong already, and I knew I couldn't let them take her, couldn't let them shape her into something for their catalogues. In that moment, I stopped being afraid of dying and started being afraid of not truly living. The final pages described her 3 days on the run, using skills learned from watching her captors to stay ahead of them, until finally, exhausted and desperate, she'd found the abandoned barn on Graeme's property. I chose it because it was well maintained despite being empty. It meant someone paid attention, someone cared about details. I didn't expect kindness. I just wanted time to rest, to think. Instead, I found. The sentence trailed off, and Graeme looked up to find Lena finally facing him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. I found home, she finished quietly. Graeme closed the journal with careful reverence. The organization, he said, his voice professionally calm despite the rage building inside him. How high does it go? High enough to have ex-military security, political connections, offshore accounts. Lena moved closer to the desk, her face set with determination. But I memorized everything I saw, every name I heard, every pattern I observed. If we can get the information to the right people. We will, Graeme promised, understanding now why the security teams watching the ranch were so professional, why the resources being spent to find her seemed unlimited. This wasn't just about one escaped woman. She was a threat to an entire criminal enterprise. They'll keep coming, Lena said, speaking the truth they both knew. Graeme stood, moving around the desk to take her hands in his, the gold band on her. Finger caught the lamplight, no longer just a symbol of protection, but of a truth deeper than any legal document. "Let them come," he said quietly. "You're not alone anymore." Lena's fingers tightened on his, and in that grip he felt both her fear and her determination. "No," she agreed, one hand moving to rest on her belly where their future grew stronger each day. "Not alone at all." The betrayal letter arrived in Miguel's hand, his face ashen as he placed it on Graeme's desk. It had been found in the ranch's feed storage, tucked inside a fresh delivery invoice. "Everything's in place. When the time comes, make sure the woman and child are in the East Wing. Payment as discussed." The paper bore the ranch's letterhead, and the handwriting was painfully familiar. Jack Foster, their feed supplier for the past decade, trusted with delivery schedules and access codes. A man who'd attended Sarah's funeral, who'd helped rebuild the barn after the lightning strike 3 summers ago. Maria noticed the feed deliveries were coming at irregular times, Miguel explained quietly. "Small changes in routine. She thought it was just the new harvest schedule, but she noticed," Graeme finished, his voice carrying the weight of command decisions made in darker places than this. "Who else knows about this? Just us and Maria. Torres is doing a subtle head count of all personnel, making it look like routine scheduling." Miguel's hand rested on his holstered sidearm, a habit from his own military days. "Doc Helena's due for Lena's checkup in an hour." Graeme studied the letter again, his tactical mind already mapping possibilities. "Foster knows our routines, our security patterns. He's been watching us build up defenses, probably reporting every detail. Should we confront him? No." Graeme's response was immediate. "He's more valuable as an unwitting source of disinformation." He stood, moving to the window that overlooked the garden where Lena worked with Maria, both women seemingly absorbed in pruning roses. "Tell Torres to maintain normal patrol patterns, but double-check everyone's credentials. Quietly. And Lena, she stays in the West Wing with Maria's family. Foster's letter confirms they're expecting her in the East." Graeme's jaw tightened. "We'll let them think their inside man is still reliable." Miguel nodded, understanding the strategy. "Use their own intelligence against them." "Exactly." Graeme turned back to his desk, pulling out the ranch's personnel files. "I want every employee's background rechecked, especially recent hires." And Miguel, he paused, the weight of command settling familiar on his shoulders. "Tell Maria to keep Lena busy in the garden. The roses need her more than ever." After Miguel left, Graeme allowed himself a moment of pure, controlled rage. Foster had been more than an employee. He'd been part of the ranch's extended family, had shared meals at their table, celebrated birthdays, mourned losses. The betrayal cut deep, not just professionally, but personally. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Doc Helena entered, her medical bag in hand, but her expression said she wasn't here for Lena's checkup yet. "Miguel told me," she said without preamble. "Foster's daughter was admitted to my husband's court last month. Drugs, probably looking at serious time." She let that sink in. The case was suddenly dropped. All charges disappeared. Graeme absorbed this new information, pieces clicking into place. "Leverage. The kind that makes good men do desperate things," Helena agreed. "But Graeme, that's not all. The judge who dismissed the charges, he's connected to a private adoption agency that's been under investigation, the kind that deals in special cases for wealthy clients." The implications hung heavy in the air. Foster's betrayal was just one thread in a larger web, one that reached into law enforcement, the courts, legitimate businesses. Exactly the kind of network Lena had described in her journal. "How's she doing?" Graeme asked, the question carrying more weight than just medical concern. "Strong, stubborn?" Helena smiled slightly. "The baby's dropped a little. We're looking at weeks, not months." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "She's survivor, Graeme. She'll understand about Foster." "She shouldn't have to," he replied quietly. "This place was supposed to be her sanctuary. It still is." Helena's voice was firm. "Because it's not the walls that make a sanctuary, it's the people willing to defend it." She opened her medical bag, pulling out a small package. "Which reminds me, Maria asked me to bring these. Inside the package were small sachets of dried roses, carefully preserved from the garden. The scent filled Graeme's office, carrying memories of Sarah, but also of recent days watching Lena bring the flowers back to life. Maria says Lena's been making them, Helena explained, putting them in all the rooms. Old European tradition, apparently. Roses for protection, for blessing. She smiled. Rather fitting, don't you think? Using beauty as a shield. Graeme touched one of the sachets gently. Even in this, Lena was fighting back, transforming fear into fragrance, threat into threshold guardians. It was a different kind of strength than he was used to, but no less powerful for its subtlety. "Keep her in the garden with Maria," he instructed. "Let her make her roses." But Helena, his voice took on the edge that had once commanded elite military units. "Watch everyone. Trust no one outside our immediate circle." Helena nodded, understanding the shift in protocol. "The best defense is often invisible," she said softly, echoing one of Sarah's favorite sayings, like thorns hidden beneath roses. Graeme looked out at the garden again, where Lena worked among her flowers, unaware yet of this new betrayal. She'd survived worse, he reminded himself, and this time she wasn't facing it alone. Let Foster think he'd bought their trust with years of false friendship. The thorns were still sharp beneath the blooms, and they were ready for whatever storm was coming. Graeme's old military tags clinked softly as he pulled them from his desk drawer, the worn metal catching moonlight. He hadn't touched them in years, but tonight they felt right in his hand, a reminder of who he'd been, who he might need to be again. The ranch's security system had picked up multiple vehicles approaching from 3 directions. Foster's betrayal was bearing fruit. 4 teams, professional configuration, Torres reported through the secure comlink. "They're using Foster's codes to bypass the outer gates." "Let them," Graeme replied, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had once guided Special Forces operations. Everything according to plan. In the safe room, converted from an old root cellar beneath the west wing, Lena sat with Maria and Helena. Through the sophisticated monitoring system, they could see the ranch's security response unfolding like a chess game. Graeme had insisted they understand every move, every contingency. "No more victims," he'd said. "Only survivors." "They're expecting us in the east wing," Lena said softly, one hand resting on her belly. "Walking into their own trap." Miguel's voice crackled over the comm. "First team approaching the east wing entrance, second team covering the garden, third and fourth spreading wide. Standard search pattern." Graeme watched the tactical display, years of training sliding back into place. Foster had sold them detailed information about the ranch's security, information that was now perfectly, fatally wrong. Every defensive position had been quietly shifted, every response pattern altered. The enemy was walking into a carefully crafted illusion. "Contact at the east wing," Torres reported. "They're in." Through the cameras, they watched the strike team enter the wing that had been their supposed target. Instead of finding a vulnerable pregnant woman, they found themselves in a carefully prepared kill box, non-lethal but highly effective. Gas dispensers activated, filling the space with a sophisticated, incapacitating agent, the kind Graeme's old unit had used for hostage recovery operations. "Second team reacting," Miguel called out. "They're moving to—" "Wait." A pause. "Graeme, they're not following standard tactical response. Someone's directing them with inside knowledge." Graeme's fingers tightened on his tags. Foster's not just a source, he realized. He's on site, coordinating. He keyed his comm. "Torres, pattern Sierra 9. They'll try to flank through the rose garden." Lena's head came up sharply. "The roses," she said, her voice carrying an edge Graeme had never heard before. "They'll go through Sarah's roses." "They'll try," Maria answered grimly, and Graeme could hear in her voice the same fierce protectiveness that had kept the garden alive after Sarah's death. The security footage showed the second team moving exactly as predicted, using the garden's dense foliage as cover. But Sarah's garden had been more than just a memorial. It was part of the ranch's defensive architecture. The rose-covered trellises that appeared decorative were actually reinforced barriers. The gravel paths that seemed random followed carefully. Planned containment patterns. Now, Graeme commanded, the garden's irrigation system activated, but it wasn't water that sprayed from the carefully hidden nozzles. The same incapacitating agent used in the east wing filled the garden paths, turning Sarah's sanctuary into a trap for those who would desecrate it. Third team pulling back, Torres reported. Fourth team, they're regrouping at Foster's position. Graeme allowed himself a grim smile. Signal the sheriff. Time for Phase 2. Through the cameras, they watched as law enforcement vehicles emerged. From hidden positions around the property, their lights staying dark. The trap wasn't just for the strike teams, it was for everyone who'd helped organize this attack. Graeme, Lena's voice came through his private comm channel. Foster's trying to reach the north gate. I recognize his walk from the deliveries. Of course she did, Graeme thought. She'd survived by learning to read people's movements, to anticipate threats before they fully formed. Torres? On it. The cameras showed Foster running now, abandoning his team as the operation collapsed around him. He made it 3 steps past the gate before Torres's team emerged from concealment, taking him down with professional efficiency. In the safe room, Graeme heard Lena release a shaky breath. It's not over, is it? No, he answered honestly. But now we have proof of their methods, their connections, and Foster. He watched as Sheriff Patterson's deputies took the man into custody. Foster will talk. Men like him always do. The night slowly quieted, punctuated by the sounds of arrests being made, evidence being collected. Graeme's tags hung heavy around his neck, but they felt different now. Not a reminder of past battles, but a symbol of protection redirected. Once he'd fought for his country. Now he fought for something more intimate. Family. Home. The future, growing in Lena's womb. Through the cameras, he could see the rose garden emerging unscathed from its role in the night's defense. The flowers seemed to glow in the pre-dawn light, as if Sarah's spirit had helped guard her sanctuary. Beauty and thorns, protection and promise, all wrapped together in the first light of a new day. The FBI badge caught the morning light as special. Agent Diana Chen laid it on Graeme's desk. Foster's singing like a canary, she said without preamble. Names, dates, bank accounts, everything. But we need Lena's testimony to make it stick. Graeme studied the federal agent, noting the competence in her posture, the determination in her eyes. Sheriff Patterson had vouched for her personally, but trust came harder these days. She's 8 months pregnant, which is exactly why we need to move now. Chen's voice softened slightly. Before the baby comes. Before they can regroup and try again. Through the window, Graeme could see Lena in her usual morning spot, tending the roses that had helped defend their home. She moved more carefully now, her pregnancy advancing, but with no less determination. It's her choice, he said finally. Everything about her life from now on is her choice. Chen nodded, understanding. Of course. But Mr. Westfield, she pulled out a thick file. We've identified 6 other women from the same operation, all highly skilled professionals, all still missing. She let that sink in. Your wife's testimony could help save them. Graeme's jaw tightened at Chen's deliberate word choice. Marriage of convenience or not, Lena was his wife now, and the thought of other women suffering as she had. I'll talk to her, he agreed. But Agent Chen, this happens on our terms, our timeline. Agreed. She stood, gathering her badge. We've got surveillance on their major properties, freezes on their known accounts, but these people, they're like water. They'll find new channels unless we dam the source. After Chen left, Graeme found Lena in the garden. She was working on a new trellis design, something that combined beauty with subtle defensive positions. The architect in her healing alongside the survivor. You heard? She asked, without looking up from her sketches. The roses have ears, Graeme said softly, and was rewarded with the ghost of a smile. Maria told me. Lena set down her pencil, finally meeting his eyes. 6 women, Graeme. 6 lives in suspended animation, waiting for someone to find them like you found me. The weight of it hung between them. Responsibility, possibility, the chance to turn survival into salvation. Graeme watched as she absently twisted her wedding ring, a habit she'd developed when wrestling with difficult decisions. "It's not just about testimony," she said finally. "I can identify locations, security patterns, the whole infrastructure." Her hand moved to her belly, protective. "But I won't risk her, not even for this." "We do it smart," Graeme assured her. "Everything recorded here at the ranch. Chen's team comes to us, and—" He hesitated, then pushed forward. "I have an idea about the other women, but I'll need your help." Over the next week, the ranch transformed into a command center. Chen's team set up secure communications in the converted barn, while Graeme and Lena worked with digital artists to create detailed renderings of the facilities where she'd been held. Her architectural training proved invaluable. Exact measurements, material specifications, security blind spots, all captured with professional precision. "The guards change shifts here," she explained, marking a spot on the digital blueprint. 4 minutes between rotations. "Enough time to—" She stopped, swaying slightly. Graeme was at her side instantly, but she waved him off. "Just tired. The baby's restless today." "That's enough for now," he said firmly, but Lena shook her head. "No. 6 women, Graeme. 6 lives." She straightened, determination overriding discomfort. "They used my skills against others. It's time to use them for something better." They worked through the night, Lena's testimony interwoven with tactical analysis from Graeme's military experience. Patterns emerged: shell companies, property holdings, transport routes. A network built on the assumption that no one would look too closely at wealth and influence. "Got them," Chen announced at dawn, her team coordinating with offices across 3 countries. "Warrants are going out. Teams are moving into position." Graeme and Lena watched from the security room as the operation unfolded on multiple screens. Properties raided, accounts frozen, arrests made with synchronized precision. But it was the smaller screen that held their attention. Live footage from a compound in Idaho, where tactical teams were escorting women to safety. "The pianist," Lena whispered, recognizing a figure being helped into an ambulance. "And there, the biochemist." Tears slid down her cheeks, but her voice was steady. "They made it." Graeme's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining. Through the speakers, they could hear Chen coordinating with other agencies, building cases, closing nets. But here in the quiet of their sanctuary, something more personal was happening. "Sarah would be proud," Lena said softly, "using this place to help others heal." Graeme thought of his first wife's vision for the ranch, of the sanctuary it had become. "She'd be proud of you," he corrected gently. "We all are." Outside, the morning sun touched the roses, their blooms opening to a new day. 6 women were starting their journeys to freedom, finding their way back to themselves, just as Lena had. It wasn't over. There would be trials, testimonies, long roads of recovery ahead. But watching Lena's quiet strength as she helped dismantle the organization that had tried to break her, Graeme understood that sometimes the greatest victory wasn't in surviving. It was in helping others survive too. The hand-knitted baby blanket lay ready in the medical room, its soft yellow wool the color of Sarah's roses. Maria had worked on it secretly for weeks, weaving prayers and protection into every stitch. Now, as Lena's labor intensified, it waited to receive new life. "Breathe through it," Doc Helena coached, her professional calm an anchor in the storm. "Of contractions, just like we practiced." Lena gripped Graeme's hand, her strength surprising them both. The labor had started in the garden, naturally, where else, as she'd been sketching plans for a children's area among the roses. Now, 12 hours later, the ranch held its collective breath. "Something's wrong," Lena gasped between contractions. "It feels different than it should." Helena's eyes met Graeme's over Lena's head. They'd prepared for this possibility, the trauma, the stress, the complications that could arise. The nearest hospital was 30 minutes away, but a medical helicopter waited on standby at the county airfield. "Let me check," Helena said calmly, but Graeme caught the slight tension in her movements. Years of reading battlefield situations told him everything he needed to know. "The baby's heartbeat is dropping," Helena announced, professional mask firmly in place. "Lena, sweetheart, we need to get you to the hospital." Fear flashed across Lena's face, not of the medical emergency, but of leaving the ranch's security. "No," she managed between contractions. "Not safe." "I've got a security team at the hospital," Graeme assured her. "Torres is coordinating with local law enforcement. Agent Chen has federal marshals on standby." He squeezed her hand gently. "Trust me one more time." Their eyes met, and in that moment the lines between convenience and commitment, protection and love, blurred completely. Lena nodded, just as another contraction hit. The next hours passed in a blur of movement. The helicopter landing on the ranch's emergency pad, Helena rattling off medical terms to the flight crew, Maria pressing the yellow blanket into Graeme's, hands with fierce instructions to make sure it stayed with them. In the helicopter, Lena's grip on Graeme's hand never wavered. Even through the worst contractions, even as monitors beeped warnings, she held on with the same quiet strength that had carried her through darkness to find them. "Talk to me," she gasped as another contraction peaked. "Distract me." Graeme found himself speaking of Sarah's gardens, of the first spring they'd spent rebuilding the ranch, of the community that had grown around them. She always said love was like planting roses, he said, raising his voice above the helicopter's rhythm. "You have to be patient, trust the process, and remember that the thorns are part of the beauty." Lena's laugh turned into a groan as another contraction hit. "Your wife was a wise woman." "Both of them are," Graeme replied without thinking, then felt Lena's hand tighten on his with something beyond pain. The hospital roof appeared below them, a team waiting with practiced urgency. Everything moved quickly after that. Lena whisked into surgery, Graeme changing into sterile gear, Helena's voice steady as she coordinated with the hospital staff. "Stay with her," Helena instructed as they wheeled Lena into the operating room. "She needs your strength now more than ever." The yellow blanket waited with Graeme, tucked safely in a sterile bag as the surgical team worked. Lena's face was pale but determined, her eyes fixed on Graeme's as if drawing courage from his presence. "Almost there," the doctor announced. "One more push." The sound that filled the room was the most beautiful thing Graeme had ever heard, a baby's first. Angry cry full of vigor and determination, just like her mother. "She's perfect," Helena announced, tears in her eyes as she helped clear the baby's airways, strong and healthy. They laid the tiny girl in the yellow blanket before placing her on Lena's chest. The moment mother and daughter met, something in the room shifted, as if the universe itself held its breath to witness love overcoming fear, joy defeating pain. "Hello, little one," Lena whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "We've been waiting. For you." Graeme found himself drawn closer, protective instincts surging as he watched his wife, and this time the word carried no qualification, no convenience, cradle their daughter. Because that's what she was now, this tiny warrior wrapped in Maria's love-knitted blanket, his daughter, their daughter. "Sarah," Lena said softly, looking up at Graeme with tired eyes. "Her name is Sarah Maria Westfield." She touched the yellow blanket gently. "For the women who helped bring her home." Graeme's throat tightened as he watched his past and present merge in this new life, this miracle wrapped in the color of roses. Outside the window, dawn was breaking over the mountains. Painting the sky in colors of promise, they had made it, all of them together. The birth certificate lay on the nursery's windowsill, morning light illuminating the fresh ink. Sarah Maria Westfield, born 5:47 a.m. Below it, Graeme and Lena's names were linked in permanent record, father and mother. Their separate stories, now bound by this new life, sleeping in the antique cradle beside them. "She has your eyes," Maria whispered, adjusting the yellow blanket around the sleeping infant. But her mother's spirit. 3 days home from the hospital, and little Sarah had already shown a determination that made her namesakes proud. Lena sat in Sarah's old rocking chair, Maria's idea to bring it down from the attic, watching her daughter's peaceful breathing. The chair had felt strange at first, presumptuous even, but Graeme had understood the rightness of it. The past nurturing the future, he'd said quietly, and that had settled any doubt. "The roses are blooming again," Lena observed softly, nodding toward the window where fresh yellow blooms nodded in the morning breeze, as if they knew she was coming home. Graeme, standing guard by the door, more from habit than necessity now, smiled at the sight of his family. The word no longer carried the weight of loss it once had. Instead, it felt expansive, encompassing not just Lena and Sarah, but the entire ranch community that had rallied around them. Agent Chen's daily security updates had become shorter, more routine. The trafficking organization was unraveling under federal pressure, its leaders turning on each other as assets were seized and operations exposed. Foster's testimony, combined with Lena's detailed evidence, had provided the leverage needed to dismantle the entire network. Torres spotted reporters at the main gate again, Miguel reported from the doorway, keeping his voice low to avoid waking the baby. Sheriff Patterson turned them away. The story had broken last week. Wealthy rancher's pregnant bride revealed as key witness in international trafficking case. The headlines ranged from sensational to sympathetic, but they'd managed to keep the most personal details private. Little Sarah's arrival remained an intimate celebration, shared only with those who had earned the right to be called family. "The other women?" Lena asked, her hand gentle on the cradle. "Any news?" "The Russian pianist is with her family in Vancouver," Graeme reported, having kept close tabs on the rescued women. "The biochemist is helping prosecutors in Sweden. They're all safe, all recovering." He moved to stand behind the rocking chair, his hand resting lightly on Lena's shoulder. "You did that. You helped give them back their lives." "We did it," she corrected, reaching up to cover his hand with hers. The gold band on her finger caught the light, no longer a symbol of convenience, but of a truth deeper than any legal document could express. Sarah stirred in her cradle, tiny fingers grasping at air until Lena lifted her, cradling her close. The baby's eyes opened, Graeme's eyes, as Maria had noted, but with a spark of her mother's indomitable spirit. "Doc Helena's here for the checkup," Miguel announced softly, "and Maria's got breakfast ready whenever you're up for it." The routine of ranch life had adapted to include these new rhythms: medical checkups, quiet celebrations, the gradual return to a normal that felt anything but ordinary. The security measures remained, but they felt less like barriers now, and more like the thorns that protected roses. Necessary, natural, part of the greater whole. "I've been thinking," Lena said, as Helena examined the baby with gentle expertise, "about the garden, the children's area I was designing before." She smiled down at Sarah. "Before this little one decided to make her appearance." Graeme recognized the look in her eyes, the architect emerging again, creating beauty from possibility. "Tell me." "A safe place," she continued, her voice growing, stronger with enthusiasm. "For children who've been through trauma, who need somewhere to heal. We could work with the recovery programs, offer them a sanctuary like the one you gave me." Helena's eyes met Graeme's over Lena's head, professional assessment mixed with personal approval. The idea was ambitious, but then so had been every step that had led them here. "Sarah would have loved that," Graeme said softly, and they all knew he meant both Sarah's. His first wife, who had seen the ranch's potential for healing, and his newborn daughter, who represented its future. "Then it's settled," Lena declared, with the quiet authority that had survived darkness to bloom in light. "Our daughter should grow up knowing that beauty can heal, that safety can be shared, that love She looked up at Graeme, her eyes full of a future neither of them had imagined possible months ago. That love can grow in the most unexpected gardens. Outside, the morning sun painted the roses gold, their fragrance drifting through the open window like a blessing. Sarah cooed softly in her mother's arms, secure in the knowledge, even at days old, that she was surrounded by unshakable love. The birth certificate caught the light, official and ordinary at the same time. But it was more than just a document. It was a promise, a new chapter, a declaration that what had started as sanctuary had bloomed into something far more precious, a family forged by choice, strengthened by trial, and bound together by love, as fierce as thorns and as gentle as roses. The court documents spread across Graeme's desk told a story of justice in neat typed lines. Convictions, 37. Assets seized, millions. Foster's plea deal accepted. The trafficking ring's leadership sentenced. Each page represented another thread of the dark web that had nearly claimed Lena, now systematically dismantled by federal prosecutors. "It's really over," Agent Chen said, her usual professional demeanor softened by satisfaction. "The last appeals were denied this morning." She handed Graeme a final document, a formal protection order that would permanently seal certain records, protecting Sarah's future from her mother's past. In the garden, visible through his office window, Lena sat with 2-month-old Sarah in the newly completed children's area. The space was a masterpiece of therapeutic design. Gentle curves, soothing colors, subtle security features disguised as playful elements. Already, 3 families from the recovery program had found healing among its paths. The Swedish authorities want to consult with Lena, Chen continued, about designing similar spaces for their recovery centers. They're willing to work remotely, of course. Graeme watched his wife point out different flowers to their daughter, naming them in English. "And check," her voice carrying faintly through the open window. "She'll like that, using her skills to help others heal. She's already helped more than she knows." Chen pulled out her tablet, showing headlines from across the globe. The story had inspired changes in international law enforcement, new protocols for protecting vulnerable professionals, increased scrutiny of high-end trafficking operations. Her testimony didn't just bring down one organization, it's changing how we fight these crimes. The baby's laugh drifted up from the garden, followed by Maria's warm chuckle. Graeme felt the sound settle in his chest, a reminder of everything they'd gained through all they'd endured. "Foster's asking to make a statement," Chen said carefully, "before they transfer him to federal custody. Says he wants to apologize." Graeme's jaw tightened. The former feed supplier's betrayal still stung, though not as sharply now. "That's Lena's decision to make." "Already made it," Lena's voice came from the doorway. She carried Sarah with practiced ease now, the baby contentedly playing with her. Mother's necklace, a gift from Graeme, yellow diamonds in the shape of a rose. "I'll hear what he has to say." Graeme started to protest, but stopped himself. This was Lena's strength, facing darkness head-on, transforming it into something useful. She'd done it with her trauma, with her skills, with the very garden that had become her therapy and triumph. "Not in person," she continued, settling into the chair beside his desk. "But I'll read his statement. Maybe understanding why he chose betrayal will help us better protect others." Chen nodded, respect evident in her expression. "I'll arrange it. And Lena?" She hesitated, then pressed forward. "The Bureau's victim advocacy program, they'd like you to consider consulting. Your perspective, your experience with creating safe spaces, it could help shape how we support survivors." Sarah cooed, reaching for the court documents with curious fingers. Lena gently redirected her daughter's attention to the rose necklace. "I'd like that," she said quietly, "but my family comes first now." "Always," Graeme affirmed, watching their daughter's face scrunch in a mighty yawn. Some battles were won with tactical precision, others with patient love. They'd learned to master both. After Chen left, they walked together to the garden. Sarah, dozing against Lena's shoulder. The children's area was empty today, waiting for the next group of healing families to arrive. But the roses bloomed steadily, their yellow petals bright against the Montana sky. "I used to dream of designing spaces like this," Lena said softly, surveying her creation. "Before, but I never imagined." She traced her finger along one of the subtle security features, a beautiful arch that doubled as a camera housing. "I never imagined building something that was both beautiful and strong." Graeme watched a security patrol pass discreetly along the perimeter, necessary still, but no longer their primary focus. "Like its designer," he said simply. Lena smiled, adjusting Sarah's weight as the baby slept. "Like our family," she corrected. "Beautiful because of its strength, strong because of its beauty." The court documents would be filed away, their victory recorded in legal archives. But the real triumph was here, in this garden where roses bloomed and children healed, where love had transformed protection into providence, and where a family born of convenience had grown into something as natural and necessary as breathing. Sarah sighed in her sleep, safe in her mother's arms, while overhead wind chimes played their silver music to the Montana wind. Justice had been served, yes, but more importantly, love had bloomed, thorns and all. The family portrait hung in the ranch house's main hall, catching evening light through western windows. 3 smiling faces, Graeme standing tall and protective, Lena seated with quiet confidence, 3-month-old Sarah reaching toward the camera with her mother's determination and her father's eyes. But it was more than just an image. It was a declaration, a milestone, the first time Lena had agreed to have her photograph formally taken since her escape. "It's perfect," Maria declared, adjusting the heavy frame with maternal precision. "Right. Between the old photos, where it belongs." She was right. The new portrait fit naturally between weathered images of ranch history, Graeme and Sarah's wedding, Miguel and Maria's 20th anniversary. The whole community gathered after rebuilding. The barn, past and present, flowing together like the generations of roses in the garden. "Sarah would have loved this," Helena said softly, standing back to admire the arrangement. "Both Sarah's," she amended with a smile, watching the baby bounce in Lena's arms. The ranch had come alive again, its rooms filled with purpose and warmth. The security measures remained, but they'd evolved, less obvious now, integrated into the natural rhythm of ranch life. Torres's team had become family, their protective, duties balanced with regular ranch work and involvement in the recovery program. The Russian pianist called, Lena told Graeme as they settled in the garden for their evening routine. "She's giving her first public performance next month. In Vancouver." She hesitated, then forged ahead. "She asked if we'd come." Graeme watched, his wife's face carefully. They hadn't left the ranch since Sarah's birth, except for necessary medical appointments. The idea of traveling, of being in public, he could see the conflict in Lena's eyes. "We could take the private jet," he offered. "Torres's team would handle security, and Vancouver's beautiful in the fall." Sarah gurgled from her blanket spread, on the grass, reaching for a fallen rose petal with determined focus. Just like her mother, Graeme thought, always reaching, always growing. "I want to go," Lena said firmly. "Need to go, maybe, to show Sarah that fear doesn't get to win." She picked up their daughter, breathing in her sweet baby scent. "Besides, Katerina says she's playing Dvořák, a little piece of home." Home. The word carried such weight now, such certainty. Graeme remembered when the ranch had felt like a fortress, a place to hide from grief. Now it was a launching pad, a safe harbor from which to venture out into the world again. "Then we'll go," he said simply. "All of us." The evening settled around. Them, painted in soft Montana colors. From the kitchen, they could hear Maria teaching one of the recovery program's children how to make tortillas, her gentle Spanish instructions mixing with shy laughter. Miguel's voice carried from the barn, telling ranch stories to a group of therapy horses' newest handlers. "I've been thinking," Lena said, adjusting Sarah's position as the baby began to doze, "about the old East Wing, The space we used to trick them during the attack. Graeme nodded, encouraging her to continue. He'd seen her studying architectural plans again, sketching ideas late at night after Sarah's feedings. What if we converted it? Made it into transitional housing for the recovery program? Private apartments, common areas, a teaching kitchen. Her voice grew stronger with each detail. A place where survivors could learn to be independent again, but with support right here, if they need it. Graeme thought of the wing's sturdy construction, its defendable positions, its clear sightlines to both the garden and the main house. It's perfect, he said, understanding how healing and security could blend together, just as they had in their own lives. We could call it Sarah's wing, Lena continued softly, for both of them. The woman who first dreamed of this place as a sanctuary, and the daughter who helped make it one. Graeme reached out, taking his wife's free hand. Her wedding ring caught the evening light, no longer a symbol of convenience but of choice, of growth, of love that had bloomed like roses through concrete. "You know what this means?" he asked, his voice gentle with understanding. "Taking on a project like this?" Lena nodded, her face set with familiar determination. "It means fully stepping into my role here, not just as someone who needed sanctuary, but as someone who can help create it." She looked down at their sleeping daughter. "It means showing Sarah that healing isn't just about getting better, it's about helping others do the same." The portrait in the hall caught the last rays of sunset, the glass reflecting golden light like a blessing. In it, they looked like any happy family. The strong father, the loving mother, the precious child. But Graeme knew the strength captured in that image went deeper than appearance. It showed a family forged in fire, tempered by trust, and blooming with the same resilience as the roses that surrounded them. A family that had learned that the greatest healing often came through helping others heal. Sarah sighed in her sleep, safe in the circle of her mother's arms, while overhead the evening star emerged in a darkening Montana sky. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities for growth. But tonight, in this garden where love had overcome fear, they were simply and completely home. The new ranch sign stood proud at the main entrance. Westfield Ranch, Sarah's sanctuary, with smaller text beneath reading, "A place of healing and hope." 1 year had transformed not just the sign, but everything it represented, the roses. Climbing its posts were new growth from old stock, much like the family whose name it bore. Graeme stood beside it now, 6-month-old Sarah secure in his arms as they waited for Lena's return. She'd finally agreed to present her sanctuary designs at a conference in Denver, her first public speaking engagement. Miguel's truck approached, bringing her home through the golden afternoon light. "There's Mama," Graeme whispered to Sarah, who bounced with excitement in his arms. The baby had her mother's spirit and her father's watchful nature, a combination that both delighted and challenged them daily. Lena stepped from the truck looking tired but triumphant. "They want to implement the design in 6 other locations," she announced, reaching for her daughter, "starting with the Vancouver site." "Of course they do," Graeme said proudly. "You've created something revolutionary here." He gestured toward the ranch, where the integration of beauty and security had become a model for recovery programs worldwide. The East Wing, now Sarah's wing, housed 3 families working through their own healing journeys. The garden therapy program had a waiting list. Even the horses had found new purpose, helping trauma survivors reconnect with trust and confidence. "Your roses are blooming," Graeme noted as they walked toward the house. The yellow blooms lined the path, their fragrance a reminder of how love could transform any landscape. "Our roses," Lena corrected gently. "Sarah's roses." Both Sarah's, they understood without saying, the wife who had first planted them, and the daughter who now played among them. Inside, Maria had prepared a welcome home dinner. The long table, expanded twice in the past year to accommodate their growing community, was set with care and love. Miguel's grandchildren played with the therapy dogs in the corner, while Helena checked on their newest resident's pregnancy progress. Agent Chen called. Miguel reported as they settled in to eat. "The last appeal was denied. It's really finished now." Lena nodded, but her focus was on the future, not the past. The Vancouver team sent preliminary sketches for their sanctuary design. They want to break ground in spring. "Just in time for roses," Maria said with knowing wisdom, passing the bread. Sarah reached for the yellow bloom centerpiece, and Graeme watched Lena guide their daughter's hand gently around the thorns. "Beautiful things can protect themselves," she explained, an echo of lessons learned and transformed. "But they still need love to bloom." The evening passed in comfortable familiarity, meals shared, stories told, plans made for tomorrow. The ranch had found its true purpose, becoming not just a sanctuary, but a source of healing that rippled outward into the world. Later, in Sarah's nursery, Lena rocked their daughter to sleep, while Graeme stood guard by the window, an old habit, transformed into a gesture of love. The room, once simply a safe space, had become a testament to their journey. Photos lined the walls. Sarah's first smile, her first time in the garden. The whole ranch family gathered for her baptism. Sometimes, "I wonder," Lena said softly, watching their daughter drift off, "what we'll tell her when she's older. About how we came to be a family." Graeme moved from the window to kneel beside the rocking chair. "We'll tell her the truth," he said. "That love grows in unexpected places, that strength can look like roses. That family isn't just about blood, it's about who stays, who protects, who helps you bloom." Lena's free hand found his, their wedding rings touching. What had started as a marriage of protection had bloomed into something as real as the roses in their garden, as strong as the walls of their sanctuary, as precious as the child sleeping in their arms. The ranch sign caught the last light of day, its message clear and true. Sarah's sanctuary, named for a woman who had dreamed of healing and a child who represented hope. A legacy of love that would continue to grow season after season, helping others find their way home, just as Lena had. In the garden, the roses turned their faces to the setting sun, their yellow petals glowing like promises kept. They would bloom again tomorrow and the next day and the next, beautiful, strong and free, just like the family that tended them.